Um, Exodus 21, we've come up through going through Exodus, and we've gotten up to chapter 20 where God lays out for the nation of Israel. By this time, they are a nation. They've come out of Egypt. When they came out through the Red Sea, they were birthed as a nation at that moment. Whenever they came through the Red Sea, and they're actually a nation. We talked about the fact that they're still referred to as children quite often, and rightfully so. But what they do, and just to remind ourselves, in Exodus 19:8, they tell Moses, the people there tell Moses, all the Lord hath spoken we will do. And again, we said that's not the last time they say that. And as we've gone through, what we've talked about and discussed is over and over and over again, we see God doing things for the people of Israel, and it's by Him doing it. He brought them out of the land of Egypt. He said, I'm going to bring you out. And this entire time, what He's done is He's gone through and shown them that the promises that He made will come to pass, and yet they still complained and murmured as they go through. Chapter 20, He starts giving them the Ten Commandments, and of course we talked about the law isn't just the Ten Commandments, but it's also the judgments and also the ceremonies and all the stuff that we'll see that as we get into it. So now we get into the judgments, all right? So He's gone through and He's given them the Ten Commandments, and again, the idea is, what was the purpose of the law? As we remind ourselves, is to show that they're sinners, right? And it's not a scale that if you can do it, then you're going to be able to get salvation. The law was never designed to do that. It was designed to show God's perfect standard and to show man that you can't match it, and you have to rely on Him. Right? The flesh is never going to be able to produce anything, and you always have to be able to know that the only way that you're going to be able to satisfy God is through faith in what He's done. Now, fortunately for us, we're on the end of the spectrum as far as that goes, as we get to rely on what Christ has done. Right? He fulfilled the law, and the only way that we can do that is through Christ, and that's the main thing that we find out today. Now, when we come to chapter 21, He's still continuing to give the law. And again, we remind ourselves that it was added to the promise. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't get rid of it. In fact, what he's doing is, we talked about, He's showing them, here's the standard. Then what He's going to do is He starts dealing with the judgments. Now, and that's where we start dealing with here in chapter 21. So, we'll read a couple verses and we'll get going. All right, chapter 21, verse 1. Now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free from nothing. Father, we thank You for the opportunity that we have to study Your Word. And as we come to these passages, may we know and understand what's going on, the purpose of it. Not try to stick ourselves back into these passages and say that this is what we're going to be judged by, but we know and understand the purpose of the law, and we're thankful for the opportunity that we have to have salvation apart from that, but only through what Jesus Christ has done. We thank You for this day. We thank You for Your Word, and we thank You most of all for Jesus Christ, and it's in His name we pray. Amen. Now, one of the interesting things is in chapter 20, if you back up for just a moment, Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Now, we talked about this last week. Verse 8, He says, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And we talked about that issue of 6 days, and then on the 7th He's already hallowed and set apart that particular day. Now what's interesting is the very first thing that we start noticing here when He's laying out the judgments. Here's judgments that He's dealing with as far as how is it you're supposed to deal with these things with specifically, He starts off with masters and servants. Notice in verse 1, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. So he's going to start listing out some things. And I will say, this section through here is fairly straightforward. And so then there's going to be a lot of reading. That's just the way it is, right? So if you notice in verse 2, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. So again, what do we notice there? Do we see that there's a connection between the 6th and then the 7th he's free? We should kind of notice that issue. It's not 6 days and then 7th he's free, but it's 6 years and then 7th he's free, right? Notice, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. Now, you take a look at that. You come in married as a servant, your wife gets to go out with you. But if you're purchased by someone to be a servant, and during that time period of your servitude you get married, the wife and kids stay and you go out. And this is just the way it is, right? And again, that's the way it is, huh? Yeah, it's God's biblical principle. It's God's biblical principle. That's his principle. He's laying that out. Huh? It's not, it is, but here's the thing. When he's laying this out, he's saying, here's how you're supposed to judge between these things. God's given them this judgment, right? Part of all this has to do with what is it that they've got going on is he's setting apart the nation of Israel. If you do this, here's how you do it. That's the biblical principle. He's laying it out right here. Well, notice verse 5, and if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door and unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. And if a man sell his daughter to a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So if you go through, God's laying this out for them. So if he says, well, I love my wife and my kids, he says, I'm not going to go out free. Well, here's how you do it. Can he still go out with his kids and his wife? Well, he's going to have to pay a price this time, right? Notice he says, I will not go out free. The only way that he can go free is if he leaves his wife and kids. So if he wants to take them with him, it says, I love my wife and my children, I will not go out free. Then what happens is, and here's the judgment, verse 6, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door and to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and shall serve him forever. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maid, well, we'll stop there. So what's he doing is he's saying what? I love my wife and my children so much, I'm going to stay as a servant. That's the judgment there. You can go free, but if you say you love your wife and your children, then you're going to stay as a servant. He has to choose. That's it. Mm-hmm. Well, because she came through that, and the children came through by that servitude, right? So then you've got that issue of, he says he's not going to go out free, so there has to be something to that. And if he says, then of course we have the judgment there in verse 6 is he's going to bore a hole in his ear, which makes you think of what? Earrings, right? That's the idea. So it's a mark, okay? And so then that's going to be along with those same lines. And again, he's saying, here's the judgments. Here's how you're going to go through making these decisions. If you want to go out, you can go out, but it's going to cost you. But if you stay, it's not going to cost you. But you're going to be my servant forever. But he can go out free by himself. Yeah. Yeah. Verse 7, if a man sell his daughter to a maidservant, so then what do you think the price is probably going to be for him to be able to go? Is he would sell his daughter to be a maidservant. She shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall not be diminished. And if he do not these three unto her, then shall she go out free without money. And so then you see, here's this issue. And of course, the issue here has to do with what's the main thing at the very beginning is, if thou buy a Hebrew servant. So then if you're a Hebrew and you know this, what are you going to choose to do to not get into this situation? Is don't get purchased as a servant. Don't do something, and we'll see how that works out. Don't do the thing that makes you a servant to somebody. Now, normally, the way that they're going to become a servant to somebody is they've come to a point where they owe somebody something. So the point is don't get to the point where you owe the person to where they can actually purchase you as a servant. And we'll see that a little bit later on. But if you get purchased as a servant, this is your choice now.
So you think this is only for Jewish people?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No Gentiles?
Because this is, huh?
They did back under Abraham, so they all had to be circumcised with these Gentiles, Jewish nations.
Well, because he's dealing with, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, he's specifically talking about if you purchase a person of your own heritage, then this is what's going to be, right? Because that, and again, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, and also you got to think, as the master, what is it that you're getting into is you also have to make these decisions as well. And the idea is, first of all, don't get in the position to be a servant. Then you don't have to worry about those, right? But if you do, here's how you're going to have to deal with it, all right? And of course, you go through there, and you see that if he sells his daughter off, that's the price they're going to have to pay. Verse 8, if she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed, to sell her unto a, this is the first time you'll see this, where they're going to deal with the Gentiles, is who is it that she's going to be sold to is a strange nation. That's the Gentiles, right? Well, notice, to sell her unto a nation, he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. Yeah. So he's saying you can't sell her to that particular nation because you have no power, because you're the one that's dealt deceitfully with her. Verse 9, and if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. So then how would she become to him as a daughter if she's betrothed to her son? Verse 10, if he take him another wife, which in that case would be, who's the he in verse 10 would be his son, right? So if his son, if he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall not diminish. So if he takes on a second wife, now he's got two wives, what's going to happen is they both have to have the same. He can't take away from the one that's been betrothed to him if he takes on another wife. And he's saying her food, her raiment, her duty of marriage shall not diminish. He says, and if he do not these three unto her, then shall she go out free without money. So if the son can't do those three things, then she's free. Right? A lot of stuff going on here, right? But again, like I said, as we read through here, this is what it is, right? So the main issue there is don't become a servant. And if you do, here's your choices. But can the daughter who was sold, is it possible for the daughter to get out free? The answer is yes, because if the son can't do those three things, keep her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage all the same. If it's changed at any point, she can get out free.
But she goes out without money, so she's back in the same situation.
But who do you think she's going to go to? Exactly. So she'll be taken care of. But the thing is she's not under that servitude anymore. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, and so that's what he's doing. He's laying out. Here's how really the government of how he's doing it. Here's how it's laid out, and here's how it's going to work when you have these particular things pop up. Yeah.
So it's like in the first part of verse 5 where he's talking about it, I guess if he gets a wife while under the servitude of another master, is that wife a maid servant of that same master, or is it just like another random Hebrew? Like is it?
It would be a maid servant to him. Yeah.
So if that's the case, is she married to the master or the son, or the master's son and the servant? Or would it just be the servant? Because that stipulation is in there.
It's not. I would assume that it would be to him, and then the daughters, he would have an opportunity to have the daughters marry his son.
Does the person who purchased them not have any say on whether they can get married? Can they say, no, you can't?
Well, again, that's not in there. But and he says in verse 4, if his master have given him a wife, so the one that purchased him is the one that's saying, here's your wife. Now, you have an opportunity. Hold on to that thought. You have an opportunity there. If I have you as a servant, and I want to keep you, what am I going to do? I'm going to give you a wife. And that's not the best way to go about it. But if I want to keep you, if you're a really good servant, and I want to keep you, I'm going to give you a wife after I get you. That way, I get to keep you, or I get to keep you and your daughter and your kids. Yeah, yeah.
That wife, so you're saying that wife would have been the new manservant and the master's wife?
What manservant?
Well, like
The one who's let go?
well, I mean, if the master gives him a wife, would it technically be the master's wife and his wife, or is
Only if the man wants to go free. Then it would then that would move to the master.
okay?
Yeah.
So she's not a wife of multiple.
No. Only if he says I'm going to leave. Which, I mean, you think if you're given somebody as a wife, somebody you didn't choose. But here it gets to the point he says, I love my wife and my children. I don't want to go out free. I want to stick with them.
Would it have been a case where like she was previously the master's wife, and the master was like, you can have her, and then if he leaves, he reclaims her? Is that what
I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's possible that she would have been a servant to him. That because otherwise he wouldn't really have control over saying that you're going to be married to her. So.
he just like held her out as a virgin until he claimed like a manservant?
Perhaps. Perhaps so, yeah. But I mean, yeah, she would have been another servant. Yeah, and that was his question. I would say that's probably what it is, yeah. But I mean, here, and again, what's the main point is don't become a servant, right? Then you don't have to, you get to avoid all this stuff, right? But he's saying if you do this, there's a price. You know, we talk about, for years, everybody was like, not everybody, but a lot of people were like, let's forgive all student debt. Well, that person incurred the debt. Don't just say wipe it away. There's a penalty for that debt. And so what he's saying is, here's how you're going to deal with that debt. I'm going to give you a way to deal with the debt in that particular government setup system. It is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the issue is here's how we're going to do this. Don't get in debt to begin with. That's the main point. But if you do, here's what's going to happen. No, you're fine. I mean, you're fine. You're fine. But again, he starts dealing with here's how you're going to go through and think about and judge in these particular situations. Now, the second section, starting in verse 12, you start seeing how how is it that you're going to start dealing with governmentally? How are you going to start dealing with, and of course, this is under their particular program, how is it that you're going to deal with injured persons? And we'll see this. Verse 12. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall surely be put to death. Period. So then, if you don't want to be put to death, what don't you do? Don't smite a man. Don't kill a man. All right? You stop and you think, that comes off of thou shalt not kill, right? So all these things are going to come off of those 10 commandments, and really he's going to start putting that stuff to use. Back here, why is it that this person's a servant? Is probably because he's back up here coveting his neighbor's wife or his neighbor's the ox or the maidservant, anything like that. So now he owes this guy. So it's a result of, here's how you judge if these things are broken, right? So if you've coveted after and you've done something to try to get somebody else's land, wife, whatever, here's what's going to happen to you. Here we see, thou shalt not kill. If you do, which fallen man, more often than not, that's what they do, is do the things they're not supposed to do. So he says, if you kill, here's the result. Here's how you judge in this particular situation. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall surely be put to death. If a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. But if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. So here's a guy that's doing what? That's premeditated murder, right? That's first degree, that what we call it. It says if somebody's doing this, what's going to happen is take him away from mine altar, and he's going to die. He that smiteth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. Yes, Aber. I think it's funny that out of all of his kids and folks that are here, he's like pointing out at you. But I mean, you think about this. How we were watching this show the other day. Anyway. If you kill somebody, according to this, what was it that God instituted is what? You're put to death. Right? You're not put up in prison for 50 years with 3 square meals, internet access, watch whatever you want. Anyway.
That changed with Jesus though? Like they just give them cast the first stone?
Well, we'll get into that too. So what's going to happen is when you do that, what's interesting is when you take a look at those things, what Christ is pointing out with he that does that cast the first stone, he that's without sin, what he's pointing out there is none of you can judge, but God's given them the judgment. Because at that time they're so far away from God's judgment. Had they gone back here and gone by that, that's what would have taken place, right? But what he's doing here is he's giving them the authority to execute the 10 Commandments, is really what he's doing. Here's how you go about doing it. Verse 16. He that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. So this is, and you stop and you think about this, how is it that somebody could steal a man and sell him? Is they could do what? Claim that this guy is taking something from me and I'm going to sell him off as a servant, right? In the context what we're dealing with there. So it's somebody, he says, I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to act like that I own him and I'm going to sell him off. What's the result? Death. Pretty straightforward, right? And of course, this is under their system, how God set up that particular government. Now, later on, we've talked about this before, during that millennial kingdom, there's still going to be people sinning, and what's going to happen is immediate judgment. Immediate. Death. They're going to toss him into the lake of fire, or the, yeah. When you think about that, at that time, there's going to, not the lake of fire, but he's going to toss him into hell. But when you look at that, that's going to be in accordance to this as well. Now, this is their governmental system of how they're going to implement those 10. Notice verse 17, and he that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Now, when we take a look at those things, when he talks about curseth his father or mother, it's not just cussing them out or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on with that. But what's the result there is what? Be put to death. Verse 18, and if a man strive together, and one smote another with a stone, or with his fist, and he die not, but keepeth his bed, if he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then shall he smote him, be quick. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. Now, when you look at that, you see that word quit there in verse 19? It's the same thing you see over in verse 28. What he's saying there, notice, here you've got a guy who punches another guy or hits him with a stone and he doesn't die. If he rises up and walks abroad with his staff, then he that smote him be quit. Now, the quit there means to be innocent. Released of it. Now, what he's going to have to do then is what? Pay for the loss of time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. So what does that person now become to the guy that he just threw a rock at that lived? Your servant. Right? We see that? That goes back to the very first ones. Here's how you become a servant to somebody is you're taking somebody and selling them off as yours, which is illegal. You're going to be put to death. Here, if you hit somebody with a stone or your fist and they don't die, you become their servant. Notice, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. How long are you going to have to be there? Long time. Unless you can pay. Right? Now, and of course, we looked at the payment of that stuff. And again, how do you not become a servant to somebody is don't go around punching people or throwing stones at people. Right? Don't kill them. Don't try to. Yeah. And that's the whole idea of debt, right? So then, verse 20. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall be punished, for he is his money. Shall not be punished, for he is his money. If man strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Now, you take a look at those two sections right there. Again, a lot of stuff going on. Verse 20 and 21, he's dealing with if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod and he die, what's going to happen is he's surely going to be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. So, if you smite your servant or your maid with a rod, and if they live 2 or 3 days, what happens? You're good. No, it's encouraging. Don't do stupid stuff.
I know, I'm talking about the servant. I know it's like the servant, as long as you don't kill him, you can beat him.
But it's not encouraging that you can beat them. That the idea is, why would you think that God would encourage somebody to beat somebody? He's not encouraging them to. He's saying if you do it, here's your punishment. Because the guy owes you for something. Huh? But here's what's happening. Because that person owes you, that debt for that person is now cleared between the two. Because the guy's dead. If he lives on, if he lives on, he's got that. What were you going to say? Yeah. 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 That's why I stopped there. But yeah. But I mean, the issue there is if this is, and to the point, he's saying, verse 22, if man strive and hurt a woman with her so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any mischief follow, then shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So the idea is, what does that person get to do if that continues on? Is they have the opportunity to do what? Retribution, if you will. The judges determine all that. That's their job, is to determine that. So again, who is it that they're going to be going to? Is the judges that were set up through Moses earlier on in this passage or the chapters, right? So they're the ones. So think about this. These are the things that Moses had to come and people had to come and talk to. And so then these are the things that these judges are now hearing all these things and saying, well, we got to make a determination to be able to do this. And so then again, if, to Gus's point, when you see in verse 23, and if any mischief follow, if it's continued on, then here's what's going to happen. That servant's going to be let go. And then also they have that opportunity of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And he shows them how to deal with those things, right? So it's not an encouragement. In fact, what should happen is you should stop doing that, because you're going to get. You remember, what'd you place there? We're in Matthew chapter 7. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So Matthew chapter 7, and again, this is, when we talk about Christ and what he's doing, when he comes not to do away with the law, but he ends up showing them something even deeper. Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, judge not that ye be not judged. Every person in the world knows that verse, and then they use that verse to say what? You're not allowed to judge me for what I've done. That's not the verse. That's not what it's talking about. Notice, judge not that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you, what? Again, that's the eye for eye, tooth for tooth, burning for burning, all that stuff. He's saying, if you keep doing that, here's how the judgment. Be careful how you judge in the situation, because you're going to be judged the exact same way. And so then Christ is bringing this up over here in Matthew. And it's not to say, well, you can go live however you want to. It's you don't live that way, because when you do, then you're going to be judged the exact same way that you judged others. So be careful how you judge them, right? Verse 3 says, and why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let him pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, blah, blah, blah. And he goes on down through there. Now, the issue there is, he says what? Don't judge. If you do, be careful, because you're going to be able to be judged the exact same way. So he's not saying don't judge. He's saying what? Be mindful of how you judge. So when you come back here and you take it upon yourself to punish your servant, be careful, because if you continue doing it, what's going to happen? You're going to be judged the exact same way. And the things that you've done to them will be done to you. All right, so it's not encouraging it. In fact, what he's doing is saying, don't do that. Be mindful of those things, right? Back in Exodus 21, verse 26. If a man smite the eye of his servant, or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. So, what's one way for the servant to get out is if you hit the servant or the maid in the eye, and the eye dies, that's the idea, is to perish, right? What happens to the servant? Their debt's paid, right? So then they're free. Okay. Verse 27, if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. Again, if you hit somebody and you take out their eye or their tooth, what happens? You no longer have them as a servant. That debt is wiped out. Right? So, again, you look at this, how should you treat your servants? Would be you should treat them pretty well and do what you're supposed to do as you're going through this. Right? Verse 28. And this one's interesting because we talked about this a few weeks ago, but if an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. Now again, that word quit means to be innocent, right? So if an ox gores a man or a woman, what's supposed to happen to them is they kill the ox, the flesh isn't eaten, and then the owner of the ox is let go. However, verse 29, but if the ox were wont to push his horn in time past, now what's that mean? He's done it before. If this is what he's doing, he's just going around jabbing people with his horns. Notice, but if the ox were wont to push his horn in time past, and it hath been testified to his owner. So it's not just that the ox has done this, but what has to happen is what? Somebody has to tell him, this is what your ox is doing. Okay? And it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. So the idea there is, what should you do with your ox if somebody tells you that it's going around jabbing people? Is put it up. Don't let it out. When you do, what's going to happen? There's liability to it, right? So you've got those issues, and so then what takes place there is if somebody tells you your ox is out here doing that, it's now your responsibility, and if you don't take that responsibility, the consequence is you die. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Yeah. Verse 30, if there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. Whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. The ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox be stoned. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall be made of it, shall make it good, and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. Now again, when we're going through here in verse 31, where he talks about, or verse 30, let's get that. If there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. Now, well, so what I would say is it's the man's life. Because either way, the ox is put to death, whether it does it by accident or it's prone to do that. But if they pay the guy, then he's dead. Then he can't. What good would that be? No, you're fine. I mean, I'm just thinking if the guy's going to get money for the ox, what good would it to be if he's going to still be put to death? Though?
The owner. Well, this would be.
Because the ox is dead either way.
But this would be if the ox did it the first time and he was told. I assume. Maybe I'm wrong.
Verse 30, if there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life, the man's life. So if he does it, and you're told, and it does it, so you're going to be put to death. But if somebody says, give me X amount of dollars and I'll let you live, that's the price for your life. And so then he could buy his way out. And you see verse 32 is 30 shekels of silver.
Even if he knew about it, he can buy his way out.
From what I see there, that's what it would be. The idea there, and again, what's he doing? He's setting up. He has to give it for a what? The ransom of his life. So again, what is it that we find out about Christ is he was ransomed for us, right? But again, you think about the terminology there. If there be laid on him a sum of money. So if somebody says, whatever the sum of money is, later on there's something different that he pops up the 30 shekels of silver. But if you say, well, the ox is going to be put to death either way, but I'm going to give you an opportunity. Now what's that person now done is they become a servant for this guy. That would be the ransom of it.
So certainly having a good attorney.
Pretty much.
They don't have the 30 shekels.
They would if they didn't have whatever the price is, they'd be put to death.
Oh, it's not, it doesn't say 30 shekels.
No, that's for something different. Yeah. Yeah. Because that's why I was saying, like in verse 30, you've got that. Verse 31, whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. If the ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox be stoned.
That's if he already knows about it.
If he knows it, here's the price.
Okay, so for the servant, it's 30 shekels.
30 shekels that they have to pay that person. Yeah. And if you can't pay it, then you're servant. And then that verse 1 through 11 is now true for you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 33, and again, what's interesting is you notice all these, they start with and if or if. Right? So in verse 33, and if a man shall open a pit. So if you're digging a hole and man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. Right? So the idea there would be what? Don't go dig a pit. If you do, mark it. Right?
It's on your own land, and that animal is coming into your land.
Yep.
Like me, that it should be the animal.
Well, no, because the animals, you're the one that dug the pit, and you don't cover it. Doesn't matter.
Now, how you gonna cover a pit?
With the covering. So, well, there,
Well, I mean, I think the point is that it needs to be marked.
yeah, you're marking your.
So like,
Well, it also doesn't know the deed to your property either. But and that's it is there. It is. But here's the thing: you've made a pit, right? Okay, so if you're digging a well, whatever it is, what should you do to prevent anything from going in it? Is you have to cover it.
reasonably,
Or put rocks around the edge to
You-
keep things from walking to the
I think,
You have to keep it. You have to mark it to where nothing can get into that pit.
well, if it was covered or something and a big ox fell through whatever you had it covered, I imagine that it doesn't, it was covered.
If somebody,
You had it covered, but it fell in.
my land, then
Okay,
their horse fell into the pit, they got it. I would say,
but here's the thing: they don't have their own land here. They all have land together. It's all each other. All of them own the things together, right? It's not they don't own this parcel. They're going around wherever they are and they dig a pit, right? For whatever reason, they dig a pit to make a well, to get water, whatever it is. But they're digging a pit for something, and he says, if you do it and don't cover it. So you would have to cover it with something. The point there is, don't dig a pit. If you do, what you have to do is you have to cover it. That's your responsibility to say and let people know, hey, here's this pit. If you don't cover it, and an ox or an ass fall in, the owner of the pit shall make it good and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. But even then, the point is don't dig a pit. If you do, cover it up. If you don't, then you're responsible for it. Going it that way.
Isn't really the owner, he's just the one responsible.
He's the one that's responsible for the pit. Yeah. Yeah. Verse 34, the owner of the pit shall make it good and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. Verse 35, and if one man's ox hurts another, that he die, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the money of it, and the dead ox also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox hath used a push in time past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. And again, that goes back to the eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing, right? So here it's, if an ox hurts another ox, it's not a person, so it's not don't kill the guy. But what they're supposed to do is put that ox to death, and then what they're going to do is, since you didn't keep it in, you're going to surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. No.
The dead ox and the other guy gets the live ox.
Yeah. No, that's why I that was my fault. I mixed up the other one. Verse 35, and if one man's ox hurts another, that he die. So here you've got the one ox that's dead, right? Then shall they sell the live ox and divide the money of it, and the dead ox also they shall divide. So they're going to take those two, whatever they sell them, the ox that's living for, they divide the money, and then the dead ox, they're going to divide that as well. If they didn't know. Yeah, verse 36, if it be known that the ox hath used a push in time past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. So it's, now I own the dead ox, and you've got the good one that's still alive. That would be the point. But yeah, that's why I was saying that first one is you've got one dead ox, right? That's what I was. Here you've got one dead ox, and what happens is, since it was my fault, and I've known this, and I've not kept him in, then you get the good ox, and I get the dead one. But again, the whole point through here is what he's doing is, here's how you're going to execute the Ten Commandments. Specifically, the last ones after the Sabbath day, right? Starting off in verse 12, honor thy father and mother. The last one's there. That's how you're going to execute those things. That's what he's dealing with here, how you're going to judge between those.
Laws, too, and their complexity is supposed to show how they live, and it's also supposed, it points to Christ
It does.
and the death on the cross. It points to that and that righteousness.
And it shows them that they're separate. And it also shows their separation from the Gentiles.
The very way they live and the very justice system that
They have. Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, every bit of this is God saying, here's how you make these decisions based off those commandments. Here's how you live if these things pop up. I mean, the fact that he goes into talking about oxes goring other oxes or oxes goring men, he knows that that's going to be part of what's going to take place, and he puts that in here, and here's how you're going to judge by that. And we see those things go on as we go through. And again, chapter 22 still deals with judgments. Chapter 3 still does, and not until you get to chapter 24, when you start dealing with the tabernacle and the worship, do you start getting to really see how they're going to go about doing those things with the actual sacrifice system and all that stuff too, right? But again, he's just laying out, here's how you're going to apply those commandments in these particular situations. And I'm sure there's probably things that popped up that the judges had to judge and think through based off of these things. How are we going to judge in this particular situation that we won't be privy to, right? But that gets us through chapter 21. And again, we're still dealing with judgments in chapter 22. He starts off, we're not going to go through this, but if a man steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, well, that goes back to thou shalt not steal, right? So again, you see he's showing them, here's how you apply the commandments in your life through my government system right here. Again, to separate them, to show them different from the rest of the world. And again, all these things are still pointing to Christ as well, which they don't know, but in hindsight, we do now. All right? We good? Questions?